What's up? What's up? Lee, what is up, man? This is your show. I'm Slam and Sam, co-hosting. What's going on, man? Where are you at?
Let's see. I am in the media room, in the pits, the very belly, as it were, of the Texas Motorplex. And the Texas Motorplex, since having that damage and the storm and all they did at the beginning of the Fall Nationals, they just continue to lead the way in what tracks should be doing. It made it so easy for me to come in today, but in this very moment, just 15 minutes before this show, plug in the internet, have a backdrop that is professional, turn on a light that was already stationed here, and make myself look as good as possible, which isn't that far, but the Texas Motorplex does help it out, certainly. So that's where I'm at. I'm in the media center at the Texas Motorplex, man.
Yes, and you called me and reached out to me and said, "Hey, man, can you take over the show for a night and help me out?" And you're out at you're the Funny Car Chaos events, and that's always a great thing to see. And what Chris Graves and everyone has going on there is amazing to be a part of. So just talk about, I guess, first things first, what's going on there with Funny Car Chaos and what your role this year is.
Right. So with my role, and first let me say again, whether Chris ever watches this or not, but Chris Graves, thank you for the opportunity. And I definitely want to make the most of it. And I want to be able to showcase Funny Car Chaos and the stories that are out here in this pit. Our guest later on the night, Brett Kepner, I talked with him last night, and I just wanted to get some points, some tips on what I should be focusing on in a situation like Funny Car Chaos. And it really was a conversation of affirmation of what I had already began to think about, because the chaos comes about because of all these combinations, but the combinations, whether it's a twin turbo or nitrous assisted or a big show funny car running on nitro or nostalgia nitro funny car or a nostalgia alcohol car or a modern day alcohol car or a brand new A fuel funny car, all those combinations, what they really represent is different personalities. And they just have a place in which those personalities, through those combinations, can be showcased and displayed in the competitive body that is Funny Car Chaos. So I get to go into the pits, get those stories, put them on Flow Racing. So I'll have those interviews on Flow Racing. Chris also has tapped me to create a show after Funny Car Chaos events called Behind the Chaos, try to give some behind the scenes look into Funny Car Chaos, which I will say is going to be a bit challenging for me. I'm not really an individual that watches that type of material. So I've got to really kind of force myself to create something like that. It's going to be interesting for me, and I think it's going to help push me in content making that much more. But there'll also be other pieces, we're going to call it underneath the flop top, and dive into some of those combinations and those personalities in their own segments and moments, very similar to what Joe Costello does with Attention in the Pits. But also being a part of the team, just been able to help out, like today, was able to send the URL stream key and the key for the stream to the individual that needed it, Warren Evans, and made the stream possible. So if you watched the stream earlier today on Funny Car Chaos, yes, that was my email that made that happen, and Warren Evans got everything set up, and everything was broadcasting as it needed to be for the fans' enjoyment and the display of the drivers and teams in Funny Car Chaos. But that's my role, pit reporter, kind of tech advisor sometimes, and social media advisor sometimes on occasion. We got the Funny Car Chaos YouTube channel monetized. When Chris brought me on board, I logged into the YouTube for Funny Car Chaos, and I'm like, Chris, why isn't it Monetize, what's going on? He's like, oh, I didn't know. I'm like, oh, we got to fix that. So some of those type of things there, Sam. So far today, good test session. I do think there were those that wanted to make a hit. They didn't get in the staging lanes, or rather the short chute. They weren't using the staging lanes today at the Texas Motorplex. They didn't get in time, and they did miss their shot. But from what I saw, it looks like we're going to have a battle between the three-time champ and the most winningest driver in Funny Car Chaos. That's Ken Singleton. He has a brand new chassis, brand new engine, brand new body. Everything is new except for him as the driver and the parts and pieces of that team that have made that a championship winning team. They intend to nab another championship, but he intends to win this race this year as the top dog. He feels that he needs to win it. But even though he made a stellar run, an impressive run, the defending A field champion, Kyle Smith, he also made a great test pass. Looking forward to qualifications tomorrow. And Kyle comes off of a runner-up already in competition, in NHRA competition at a regional event in Louisiana. So he has already been in competitive mode, and that might very well be a leg up for him going into eliminations if he's again in the A field to win again, already having a race under his belt. Sadly to report, there has already been carnage. Some of you may have seen floating around on social media that the Scott Palmer assisted funny car was completely sideways. And that's all I saw was a photo of it sideways. I didn't know if it was stopped, if it didn't hit the wall, what, I didn't know. But it did, in fact, hit the wall, and it was severely damaged. I'm not sure exactly what happened, but apparently it took a dead turn left, right into the wall, spun around, destroyed the body, hurt the chassis. But those folks have already committed to getting it front halved and also getting a new body. So good day of testing here at the Texas Motorplex, and we're looking forward to qualifications tomorrow, Slam and Sam.
No, and that's awesome to hear. And, Lee, you're out there, you're reporting what's going on, you're helping out. And, the Motorplex, like you said, they've got a lot of things going in their favor right now. Unfortunately, they did have, the weather that I wouldn't say helped them, but it did hurt them in a way. And now you can see what it's like to have a good leader at the helm and support system where everyone is wrapping behind them and they're pushing that complex to be what it needs to be. Just looking here, Lee, at some of the people that are tuning in, you got a question here that says, do you think all these combinations should be put into different categories for Funny Car Chaos?
No. And that's the unique element of Funny Car Chaos, that all these combinations do come together. And I think what Chris Graves has done is, because there are several fields. For example, this weekend there's A, B, C, D field, and in fact there's even a smaller 4-car field that is running. I don't believe there's any points involved, but there's money involved. But A, B, C, and D fields compete on a even point earning system, but all these combinations can come together. So with the field only being 8 cars, let's say you got a nitro burner and the last car qualified was an alcohol burner. Because it's only 8 cars, it's closer than what you might think. Just like last year, Dale Worsham looked like he had it sewed up, but he had to pedal it once in the final round, and Kyle Smith didn't, and the alcohol car won and prevailed in the A field. Yet there was a nitro burner that did win in one of the other fields. So again, eight car fields, several fields. These combinations work out, and it's actually closer than you might think. I think that's the recipe that he's been able to work out in this outlaw funny car sanctioning body, is because the fields are small, 8. All these combinations are still rather close, even though they're wildly different.
For sure. You know, and like I was gonna say that too. I don't think that you take this unique style or unique event and put it into categories. Once you start doing that, then you might as well call it, you know, I mean, I'm not gonna say a bracket race, but you might as well just call it any other race. That's the unique part about what Chris Graves has created, is saying, you know, this race is gonna be ran and we have our different fields and everyone's gonna run together. So I like that. I mean, I'm all for that. I'm one with that idea. I mean, I think it just creates this unique vibe and atmosphere that you get down there. Pat was saying that he's only 5 hours away, so there's no excuse for him not to be there. So I think Pat's gonna come and check out, man. And that's one of those things too. If you're close to these tracks and if you're close to these atmospheres, get down there, take it in. I mean, breathe in, you know, some of that nitro, breathe in those burnouts and smell those Hoosier tires or those Goodyear tires. It's good for you. It's healthy. I mean, it gets the blood going. So, you got some other people rolling in that says it's a really cool format.
Yeah, and that fella right there, Sammy Eubanks, he'll be playing and performing later on. He's regularly at the NHRA national events performing and singing, and he will be performing later tonight. That's why I'm not staying the whole show, is because they're having barbecue and music right now in the pre-party on Thursday night. So, folks, I have taken time to come spend a little bit of time with you to ask a couple of questions for Brett Kepner, and then, yes, I'm checking out because I'm hungry and I like live music.
Just eat some for me, Lee. I mean, we're supposed to be.
You know I can. So. You know I can.
All I'm gonna say, brother. That's all I'm gonna say. Hey, halftime show, Bone Shaker Jet Truck.
Ricky, man, look, we need to connect you with Chris Graves for sure. Maybe we can match race the Jet Truck with the Jet Funny Car. All right, maybe we can do that. Maybe that can work out that way. But yeah, we need to get you down, man.
Lee, this is how funny I guess my workday went today. So I had one of those torches. I was doing some wire connectors and I was using my torch and I kept hitting it. You know, it's like poof, poof. And I'm like, after a while, I kind of caught myself. I'm like, I'm kind of like a jet car. So I started walking around doing it. I know I'm kind of silly, but I'm just saying, reminded me of the jet cars. Everybody's got to be somebody, right?
That's right. That's right. Hey, jet cars are cool. I wish there was a whole entire touring series.
Would you drive one of those things?
Yeah.
I don't know, man. That's just one of those ones where I don't know. I mean, I'm not scared of many things, but I don't know. It's one of those. I just don't think I could do it. I mean, but you're the same guy that said you wanted to get on a Top Fuel Harley, so
I do.
You're crazy. And I think anybody that's out there, people that are listening, knows that MMR is absolutely nuts because he wants to get on one of those. With a show like what you
I wouldn't mind getting on one of those. I'm open to Jet Funny Car. Matter of fact, Bone Shaker, Mr. Rick Kopp, he has offered for me to ride in his jet truck, and I believe the closest he comes to me is Motor Mile Dragway. And if that weekend is open, I'm buying a fire suit from you and a helmet from Mad Bro Motorsports, and I am getting on the truck.
There you go.
See?
No, but see, Lee, that's not okay. If you get in the truck, you have to wheel the truck. There's no sitting in the passenger seat.
Stepping stones, man. Stepping stones.
No, it's all or nothing. There's no, hey, I know the show is called Between the Slicks, but there's no Between the Slicks. Either you're in it or you're out of it. Okay?
Right. Well,
So,
look, just like
hey,
you have Randy Meyer bringing out an A fuel funny car combination to basically give a stepping stone from funny car of the Nitro world to the big show car. You got to have stepping stones in other ways as well. Like Baby Jet, maybe Baby Jet first, and then Big Jet. I don't know. I don't know if they have Baby Jets.
I don't know. But
have you seen the jet-propelled Amish carriage? Have you seen that?
No, but I did see a jet car outside of the PRI party like 4 years ago, and the guy's like, "Oh, you want me to fire it up?" JT's like, "Yeah, right in the middle of the street, downtown Indy. This guy's got a jet car outside of a bar. Yeah, hilarious. Cops rolled up. Hey, man, you cannot do that. But look, it's got flames. It's pretty cool. But yeah, I mean, reading that story about what Randy Myers has got going on and Julia getting the chance to, jump in that ride, the Randy Myers and his family have done a lot of great things for drag racing. I mean, across the board. So I think them continuing to provide, like you said, those stepping stones, that platform to give these drivers another chance, and especially someone like Julia. I mean, she's done it. She's put in her time to, earn that respect, and as a driver and as a personnel, I think she's done what she needs to do to be able to get that opportunity.
And I will say, maybe she's a bit more adventurous than I really thought she was, stepping out and stepping in the funny car, because A fuel of the dragster variety is dominated by gals, and they perform at the top level, whether it's Miss Salinas or one of the Meyer sisters, Miss Fink, others as well. But many would say that, I don't want to take anything away from driving a dragster, but dragster compared to funny car, I think we all know, shorter wheelbase, much more of a handful, far much more input in driving those things. And the ladies gravitate to the dragsters for some reason. And yeah, I think it's refreshing that you've got Julie looking at this possibility in funny car and what might be coming down the pipeline in NHRA, which that's a whole other discussion whether it needs to happen or not. But it's refreshing to see this young lady who's done A fuel for so long. Maybe she feels like there's not really a step up other than top fuel, and maybe top fuel just isn't for her. And maybe it's oversaturated right now. Maybe there is a place for her to make a mark as a young lady in funny car in particular, because in the funny car ranks right now, it's solely represented by Alexis DeJoria. But you look at the top fuel ranks, we're talking Brittany, Leah, Krista, and I feel like I'm forgetting someone right now in the top fuel ranks. Maybe I'm not, but maybe that is oversaturated, and go into funny car and have a little bit more exposure. Maybe she's thinking that. I don't know. Maybe she just loves drag racing, and the opportunity to get in a funny car was just cool. I think that's cool.
No, I mean, it for sure is. And I think that opportunity, like you said, right now at this current moment, the only person that we have in the funny car ranks is Alexis. So, I mean, I think that's a great opportunity if she wants to continue to advance, and Randy's going to stand behind her. I can't help but laugh right now. Brett Kepner's down in the ready room waiting for us in the green room, doing some funny faces at us both, because we all know the comedian he is. But it's great to see that we have continuing to now have more women or young ladies, however, you want to classify, that want to step up into, these ranks and have the opportunity to do it. I mean, in a sport that's, mostly male driven and everything, it is nice to see that we do have, younger women that want to come up and move up in the ranks and say, hey, you know what, I want to give this a shot and see what happens. I mean, without that, how does this sport grow? We can continue to talk about it, just like in pro stock, seeing now what Camry's done and the support and the love that she's getting from marketing partners and family and friends. I mean, that's what it's all about. It creates another avenue, as you and I have talked about countless times, for people to have another fan favorite, for another young lady to have someone that she can look up to, that she can idolize or whatever she's going to do, and have someone that can be their role model. But
yeah,
I mean, is there anything else, Lee? I mean, we got Brett. We had the man, Mr. Brett Kepner, in the waiting room. I don't know how long you want him to wait.
Not much longer. We do want to bring him on very, very soon. But I will say, on the lady chatter, Funny Car Chaos, the ladies are well represented even here, and over several different age ranges. I would say you've got a lady that she's just out of her teens, basically, in like a nitrous assisted funny car. You've got another young lady that is in a alcohol burning funny car, and then Nancy Matters is in a nitro burning funny car, and it's got a nostalgia ride, but also got a big show ride out here this weekend. They're shaking down, apparently, and I've got to figure more on that for sure, but they're well represented here in Funny Car Chaos. And then who cannot love backup girls? And there are several backup girls that are well known here in the Chaos ranks as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, I had a friend actually ask me about that after the Arizona race, or no, actually they were at the Gators, sorry. And they're like, man, the backup girls is kind of making a new, appearance. That's something definitely that I have a question for Brett about is, is that old school vibe coming back into drag racing, like what we're used to. So there's a lot to talk about, but I think right now, Lee, I think we can break to a short break, brought to you by one of your sponsors. And then next thing you know, we'll have the man, the myth, the legend, the voice of drag racing for years, Mr. Brett Kepner, and who knows who he may sound like when he comes on.
If you own a beautiful modern muscle car like this 1320 Challenger, I'm sure you don't want it stolen. Because the Challenger and many other modern vehicles have an easily accessible neutral release strap. That was your coin holder in your central console, and beneath that there's this red cord that someone can pop, put it into neutral, and potentially easily steal your car. But at Destroyer1320.com, they have the TDS, Theft Deterrent System, which is a cover over that strap using factory mounting points so that you don't get popped by a thief. So make sure to go to Destroyer1320.com using promo code MMR for 15% off and get your Theft Deterrent System, TDS, and steal the thieves' hope.
Brett, how you doing, man?
Sam and Lee, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Look, glad to have you on. I've been wanting to have you on my show for a while, and I figured this would be a great time because with what is happening this weekend, definitely talk about the future, a little bit of history. And first question I got for you, man, with what Chris Graves is doing with Funny Car Chaos, like over 60 funny cars here this weekend, how close?
Before you go on, how many showed up for the group photo? Do you know?
I don't know the exact number. Like we're still, okay. I don't think Chris is going to count.
Over 60 right now. And I also know it's Thursday, so quite a few people are still not there. Yeah.
Right. And I think that's one reason why Chris hasn't dropped the exact number is because we're still waiting for a few to roll in, but well over 60 right now. And yeah, where does this rank up there with the great funny car meets of Southern California and the Pacific Northwest and elsewhere with what Chris Graves is doing?
It's a very interesting question with a very weird answer that I'm going to give you, and that's it doesn't rank with them because that stuff was a half century ago. You can't compare anything that's going on this planet right now to a half century ago. So let's not. Funny cars don't run on on junkyard cast iron 392s and 426s anymore, and nitro is at $48 a gallon. It's a completely different world. But the aspect of where Chris Graves' idea fits into the history of drag racing is pretty amazing. What he has done is obviously changing the sport. Prior to Chris's original idea, the first year that Chaos ran, there were only a couple of events that came close to 32 funny cars. The most recent one before Chris started was 2017, I think it was, at the Great Lakes Nostalgia Funny Car Circuit's Funny Car Nationals that Greg Miller has at his Keystone Raceway Park in New Alexandria, Pennsylvania every year. The 2017 meet had 31 cars. Prior to that, even that same year, the only other event that approached 30 cars was the Bakersfield March meet. And granted, most of the cars at Bakersfield were fuel cars, but it didn't really matter. We're talking total funny cars. When you look at NHRA national events, since the turn of this century, there has only been 3 times more than 32 cars on the property, and that's combining nitro and alcohol. What Chris did when he eventually last year doubled that number was create something that 99.9% of the people on the planet, maybe everybody but Chris Graves, would have told you is no longer possible in the 21st century. And there's a reason, there's several reasons, but there's one main reason that Funny Car Chaos is doing as incredible as it is. I should ask you two guys, what do you think is the main reason for his success? Each of you.
Lee, go ahead.
I would say, and I think most would think I'm going to say the combination factor and run what you brung, but it's his payout scheme. It's very strange, it seems, in the rest of the drag racing world from what I understand.
Sam?
First of all, I agree with you too, Lee, is the payouts. Payouts are getting drivers, bringing their stuff out again. We hear it from NHRA and down of why people don't want to drive their stuff in different places. But then also, like I said, the uniqueness of what he's doing. You're not getting broke up into a certain class. You're able to run with other people and see where you match up. And that brings it back to something that I was going to ask you, Brett, is, does this style of racing bring it back to what we were used to seeing or what we grew up in that old school grudge kind of category?
No. But you did bring up the key, Sam. This style of racing, Funny Car Chaos, is completely different than everything else. The big drawback to running NHRA Nitro Funny Car, NHRA Alcohol Funny Car, even when IHRA had one or the other, or both for a very few years, or going back to AHRA or even UDRA, there's only one reason that the Funny Car Chaos is so popular, and that's because everybody is competitive. If 64 cars showed up at an NHRA Nitro Funny Car meet, how many would go home?
Yeah.
48, right?
Yeah.
So with Chris's program, and for the viewers that don't know how this works, we should probably explain it. Funny Car Chaos is not just one big giant class. The first quickest 8 qualifiers are the A field. The next 8 are the B field. The next 8 are the C field. And at this event, there's even a D field. So that's 32 cars that are competitive, not necessarily that are going to get, win or be whatever, but can actually qualify and say, I lost first round, no matter what they spend. And between the three of us, we have to look at the future and say, this thing's soon going to have E, F, G, and H fields, because that's why it's so popular. It doesn't matter what the payout is. It doesn't matter if the H field pays a popsicle to win. It doesn't matter if it's, $500. That's not why people come to this. They come to be a part of the deal, and being a part of the deal does not mean failing to qualify. Granted, 32 cars are going to fail to qualify at this race, but right now it's still more of a social event than it is a race. Later on, it's going to be a place for you to take your car and actually, have a chance of qualifying. Nobody's going to give you a chance to win, but you. But, who cares if you're in the H class where the field stretched from 599 to 610? Nobody cares. In the 8th mile, of course, we're talking. That's not the purpose. The other big thing going for Chris, and Chris knows he has to walk this tightrope, is right now the difference between NHRA racing and funny car chaos, whether you have an A class, a big show type car, what he would call an A field car, or a D field car, is the lack of commitment. With an NHRA big show alcohol car or a dragster, or a nitro funny car, you're looking at 24 events, and there are more and more cars, obviously, that are literally starting their season saying we're only going to run 10 races this year. But that's not what most people shoot for. It's not their goal. They want to be a part of the big show every race. That's not the case with Funny Car Chaos. There's only 6 events. Or was it 8 this year? I forget. Either way,
yes.
And you're not tied down. Ken Singleton really won his points championships because he was one of the only guys that went to all of them in the Funny Car Chaos. Because a lot of people don't. Because a lot of people can't. Because a lot of people don't want to. But they can go to these when they feel like it. So those are the 2 big advantages: no commitment, and everybody's competitive. And from a spectator standpoint, you get to see more funny cars than you actually need to see. So there you go.
Yep. For sure.
Well, thank you. Good night, everybody.
Yeah, right. So going bracket racing, you were on their channel recently. They wanted me to submit a question.
Uh-oh.
Well, we have a fuel-powered funny car here with Meyer.
This is a big deal with me. I actually posted something on social media, which is fairly rare for me. So yeah, I'm really really anxious to see what Randy Meyer and Julie Natas can do.
Yes.
Yeah, the numbers to beat. I'll give you a scoop, because nobody but Scott Weiss knows this. Everybody knows. Well, I shouldn't say everybody. The few people that remember 1998 and IHRA, the last time an injected nitro funny car ran and was competitive. Scott Wise, then sponsored by Sherwin-Williams Paint, run by his dad and his uncle, Joe and Dan, and his brother. They ran 574, was the best in the quarter mile at 244, I think 0.79 miles per hour. What a lot of people don't know is what the 8th mile records are, or what the 8th mile numbers were on that pass. So to give people a comparison number, and if it works halfway as well, as good as it's supposed to, these numbers are going to be ripped apart. But it's actually 384 at 201 miles an hour is what they ran when they went 382. They went 574 at 244 mile in the quarter. It was 382 at 201 in the 8th. So that's the number to pay attention to. And actually, I don't think 382 is going to get you in the A field this year. I could be wrong, but I don't think that's going to be the case. So if they equal Scott Wise's 570 capability, non-supercharged nitro burning funny car, they'll be right at the top of the B field, I think. But if they run the way the world thinks they're going to run, it'll be an A car right off the bat.
Yes, it definitely has the potential for that. It's Randy Meyer. I mean, he's got it figured out.
509, buddy.
Right. Bingo. Right. And Texas Motorplex provides a stellar track. I mean,
There
that
you
evening
go.
session,
Yeah.
who knows what we might see.
Now,
So
there's a lot of weird things going on with this. I have a feeling you're going to lead to the NHRA angle, but before we get to that, keep in mind, Randy has already stated publicly, hey, this is just a total experiment. We haven't made any laps anywhere else. We don't know how this is going to work in a short wheelbase car. We don't know how it's going to work with a funny car clutch, blah, 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 blah. So it's a total experiment, and I need to take myself and you guys off the hook by saying nobody has any idea what it's going to do, including Randy Meyer. But on the other side of that coin, you can't escape the amount of power he's starting with. In other words, he's starting with enough power for this to be an A car and is going to have to get it down the track by detuning it because of the unfamiliarity with the chassis. So sorry to go off tangent there, but go ahead and finish. I think I know where you're going, but go ahead.
No, it's definitely noteworthy, and I just find it. I love what Chris has done in opening up where all these different combinations can come in, because, like you said, 1998, 1999, we haven't seen it, and here it is again.
Keep in mind, Great Lakes Nostalgia Funny Car Circuit, which is the biggest funny car circuit out there right now. Their circuits are kind of a thing of the past for a variety of reasons, but the Great Lakes Circuit, which is what it's called for short, they've got almost 40 cars on their roster, and at their biggest events, and they run 10, 12 events a year, but they're Funny Car Nationals and a couple of other big races. They do run an injected class. There are injected fuel cars out there. This isn't the only one in the world that's the first one that anybody's seen in the 21st century. That is absolutely not the case. Heck, there's a guy that runs a rear engine injected fuel Corvair funny car on a regular basis. Mike Racer is his name. Anyway, but keep in mind, there's no place else to run this, which is why Randy Meyer is looking at it as an experiment. I don't know if you guys know this. I'm pretty sure a lot of the listeners or viewers don't know this, but Randy Meyer posted the car for sale. He said, it's for sale this weekend. Come by the pits and buy it.
Yep. There's a sign right now. It has the orange and black force. It is out there. Yes. Yeah.
It's a roller. He's not selling you his 509 injected fuel motor, but the funny car itself is a roller. So he doesn't have any plans here. Now, when Julie made the press release the other day, you were talking earlier in the show, what you were saying was pretty much the truth. Obviously, Julie has her eyes on blown fuel funny cars. That's her distant objective or near future plans. We don't know. But either way, she is excited to get some seat time in a funny car with this thing this weekend. So that's going to help. Go ahead.
But speaking of that, like how do you think that, presents her as a driver, as someone, who has built her name under the Randy Meyer name and has done great things? What does this say for her?
Yeah, are you familiar who Julie Natas's father is?
Well, yes.
Well, that's where she got her racing background. The fact that she drove Randy Meyer's car and did it successfully is one thing, but her dad was, European FIA top fuel champion. So
I was just saying with the help of Randy. So I was just saying, do you think that this pretty much speaks volume of who she is and like where she's looking to go in the future?
No, and that came up in a conversation with Brian Loans last night. He and I were talking about this very situation, and Brian and I were discussing the fact that the NHRA has brought up to the dwindling numbers of alcohol funny car racers multiple times in this century. Do you want us to start including, a combination that would include injected fuel cars into the eliminator? And they all say no. They don't want it. Well, as you're well aware, from 2000 to 2022, the number of alcohol funny cars at their events, whether it's points meets or national events, has just been, I don't even know of a proper adjective. It's just been horrific. Brian and I were joking on the phone saying it used to be 12, and now they're asking 8 if they want the A fuel cars. Well, of course, the 8 guys are going to say no, and for a very good reason, because of that 1:5:09 time slip. Before they went 5:09, it was the 5:10 time slip that had stood for 14 years. They don't want, with their screw cars to have to go up against that, because right now, at the current rules, a screw car can't go 5:10 unless you open up the overdrive. And what happens when you open up the overdrive? You start burning stuff up. So everybody says, no, we don't want the A fuel cars in our class. But guess what? The class is almost dead right now. Even with an incredible amount of prize money up, the Midwest Drag Racing Series, don't get me wrong, fantastic program. They can only get 6 cars at any of their races. I think one race last year had 8. So the entire class is really in trouble. And now, even though they just asked a couple of weeks ago again and were turned down, now the NHRA has to look at saving the class. The NHRA is in a position, I think both of you are aware, where they cannot just drop a class anymore. That's completely out of the program. They also, for the same reason, cannot create a new class anymore. So that's a whole nother show. We'll get into that later.
Right.
But the point is, you have to understand what happened with Scott Wise. Do you have time to actually go into that?
Sure, go ahead.
I want people to understand, because to the average fan, when you say, well, yeah, we ran them in 1998, 1999, but they haven't been run since then because they haven't been allowed. They always, people always say, well, why not? It's a great idea. At least they can try them. Well, you guys know the basic problems with top alcohol dragster and the A fuel versus blown alcohol combination. You can't just throw weight on an A fuel car. It likes weight. It likes load, so it goes quicker. So that changes the whole world of how to slow them down to equalize their performance with the blown alcohol cars. When a lot of people say, well, just open up the blown alcohol cars. Well, I just said why that's not a good idea, because then you have to spin the blowers at 1,000,000,000% overdrive and they burn up stuff. So it's too expensive. So back to the IHRA situation. In 1998, when Ted Jones and the International Hobart Association decided to allow injected nitro funny cars, they did it for a reason. The reason was they didn't have supercharged nitro funny cars. If you remember, back then it was just top fuel, and then their alcohol funny car class was their big funny car deal. So they wanted something that was going to have flames during the Saturday night and Friday night qualifying session. It's not that it wasn't thought out well. There was a special program. When I say that, I mean because Wise eventually ended up dominating the class with just horrifically quick and fast numbers, just stupid stuff. 1998 Norwalk IHRA race was the event where Scott Wise actually figured out the combination. They had run the car all year. And it's important to remember, there were a total of 6 injected nitro funny cars running in the IHRA in 1998. 6 of them. But Wise was the quickest and fastest. And when Norwalk came around the week before Labor Day, they figured out the combination. That's where they went 4 straight 570s. They didn't even win the race, but they went 4 straight 570s. Second quickest car was a blown alcohol car at 591. So that made everybody go crazy. Now, that could end an argument in itself. But here was the problem. The NHRA's alcohol funny cars were already dropping like flies because they allowed screw blowers. And a lot of people didn't want to buy a screw compressor. So the IHRA decided to take a direct stand against the NHRA, even pick up the people that were mad because they were spending so much money with screw blowers, and only allowed Roots style superchargers. You could run a high helix, but it had to be a Roots blower. It couldn't be a screw compressor. So in 1999, the comparison between 98, 99, the comparison between Scott Wise's injected nitro car going 574 and the next quickest car being a blown alcohol car at 591 wasn't a comparison with an injected nitro car and a screw car. And the reason that IHRA dropped it was because they couldn't figure out how to slow Scott down enough to equalize him with the blown alcohol Roots cars. And the one thing IHRA didn't want to do was make the Roots guys spend more money, because at the time IHRA was drawing over 30 alcohol funny cars to every event. So this is why at the very beginning of the conversation, I said, you can't compare this to the 70s. You can't even compare this to a quarter century ago. It's a completely different world. So I know Randy wants to make a statement, but I'm really interested as to what that statement will be perceived as if he runs well. Thank you. Good night, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, Brett, look, I think Sam dropped out. We might be having some technical difficulties, but
I think he just got bored and left. That's what I think.
Right. Well, with all this combination talk, clue us in on the apparently brief period that nitrous oxide was used along with nitromethane in funny cars.
Well, actually, nitrous oxide was used in fuel classes for it wasn't that brief. People started messing around with it in the 1960s. And yes, I'm talking about nitrous oxide, oxygen in a bottle, not hydrazine or any of the other classic folklore crap. Nitrous oxide, was not a new idea. It was used initially in World War II. The Nazis, the Luftwaffe, in their Messerschmitts, used nitromethane, an oxygen-bearing fuel, to not only increase power, but also increase altitude capabilities. The U.S., what's the word? Not compensated, but turned around and in response created nitrous oxide injection in the P-51 Mustang, which just injected more oxygen into the engine, just like nitromethane did, and allowed them to fly higher and faster. So the technology had been around. The understanding of what nitrogen and oxygen, by the way, the oxygen is the only thing that adds to the ability to burn fuel. The nitrogen is a cooling agent for most cars, whether it's pro-modified or anything else. It's been around forever. It was in the late 1960s and early 1970s that it really became popular. There was a war going on in 1972 between Don Garlitz, Clayton Harris, and a couple of other people in Top Fuel, where they swapped the record, the national elapsed time record, back and forth several times that year. And everybody but Garlitz, I think, was using nitrous at that time. Now, they caused a lot of explosions, and they didn't have blower restraint systems back then, so that meant blower fragments going into the grandstands and stuff. So the NHRA was a little worried about that. It actually lost favor before the NHRA needed to ban it. And therefore, there were a couple of people jacking around with it through the 70s until we got to the 1982 season, when people really started using nitrous with fuel cars. And it was after that, in 83 and 4, that NHRA said, no more nitrous and no more nitro. As a matter of fact, I hope I'm not talking out of turn here, but Ted Jones and Steve Gibbs had a very close relationship, even though they were, NHRA versus IHRA. They talked quite a bit and really formulated a lot of rules together. And one of the reasons that Ted Jones was able to get nitrous oxide standardized or accepted within the sport was because he kind of promised Steve Gibbs that he would not allow it with nitro. So nitrous oxide and nitro were around for a long time, but the whole combination has been banned. Actually, I can tell you right now, the last car I remember running nitro and nitrous oxide at all was, you might not remember this one, I hope you do, the Boggs brothers injected nitro 150-inch wheelbase altered that was too long to be an altered and was moved into top alcohol dragster. That car ran nitro and nitrous. I think it was through about 93 or 4. Does that answer your question? Or did everybody go home? Well, ladies and gentlemen, it looks like it's just you and me. I don't know how to really expand on what I just said. But I will say the supercharged alcohol funny car program right now is in dire need of something. But one has to remember that racers will do anything except spend money that they don't think they have to spend. It quite honestly is the only reason that Top Fuel and Nitro Funny Car and NHRA race 1,000 feet. The NHRA didn't change that rule. Are you back?
Wow, yes, some serious technical difficulties.
I carried the show as best I could.
Well, I'm glad it's you tonight because anyone else, I'm telling you.
You know, I almost have to finish the statement that I just made because people are going to be very confused. I was talking about the fact that racers won't spend money that they know they don't have to, and that's why Top Fuel and Funny Car are racing 1,000 foot. I was about to say NHRA didn't make a rule that said you have to race 1,000 foot. That was the racers who threatened to boycott Denver 2008 unless the NHRA switched to 1,000 feet. If you remember, when Scott Kalita was fatally injured at Englishtown, that Saturday when he died, the racers said, "That's it. We're not going to race Sunday until you got to shorten the track," because whether or not it's true or not, the general consensus the day he died was that they were racing on a track that was too short, and the racers banded together. The PRO, when I say the racers, I mean the Professional Racers Organization, banded together and said, "We're not coming out for eliminations on Sunday unless you shorten this track." The NHRA didn't shorten the track, and guess what happened? Lee?
I do not remember. I'll be honest with you. So,
really? You don't remember the fact that absolutely every qualifier showed up in the lanes and raced?
There you go. Well, it's like, so you, with making that point, I remember the COVID year, 2019, yeah, when all that happened.
Right.
The pro stock crowd was talking about not going to a particular race.
Right.
But it never happens.
Exactly. Well, actually it does. And it's very important to the rest of the NHRA 1,000 foot story. The NHRA put out press release after press release after press release after Scott Kalita's death that they were looking at every conceivable way to continue to run quarter mile racing with, new blowers and new heads and new fuel and new new fuel percentage, and just a variety of it. They racked their brains trying to come up with a way to continue 8 mile. Getting a couple of dozen years ahead of myself, to continue a way of quarter mile racing in Top Fuel and Funny Car. And that they made a steadfast promise to the fans. We are looking at, we want to continue quarter mile. That's it. And every single one of the changes cost money. And after Norwalk of 2008, which was the last quarter mile race, the NHRA said, well, we're going to have to make a decision here. It's either going to be the heads, it's going to be the blower, it's going to be another gear, it's going to be, poke out one of your eyes, whatever it's going to be to slow the cars down safe enough for you to continue racing quarter mile. And they said, no, you make it 1,000 feet by Denver or we don't show. Well, do you know anything about the 1982 Cajun Nationals?
No, not in particular.
The 1982 NHRA Cajun Nationals, held at Baton Rouge, Louisiana, state capital dragway, is notorious in drag racing history because that was a true NHRA Nitro Funny Car boycott. They said, raise the money or we're not coming to Baton Rouge. And NHRA said, yeah, we've heard that before. You're all heroin addicts. And I am one, by the way. I'm a racer. So I'm telling this story as a heroin addict, and I'm not reformed. Anyway, they all said, no, you raise the purse or we're not coming. NHRA said, you're full of it. Guess what happened? Not a single Nitro funny car showed up. And the NHRA raised the purse. So the granted, that was 40 years before what we're talking, but still the NHRA understands that the PRO can get together and pull this off, even though it's slitting everybody's throat. The NHRA does know that it could possibly happen, and that's why the NHRA succumbed to 1,000 feet. But please don't ever think that the NHRA, and I don't work for the NHRA. I haven't worked for the NHRA since 1984. I did a lot of their TV shows, but I wasn't an employee. But please understand, I'm not saying this for any other reason other than the facts. I have no opinion in the matter one way or the other, but the NHRA never outlawed quarter-mile racing. The racers said, you make 1,000 feet or we're not going to go play.
With you mentioning 1982, is that the one that Bernstein was heavily involved in, kind of spearhead? Is that the one?
Well, Bernstein was the head of the PRO for many, many years. At the time, I don't really remember if it was him or Ray Alley or somebody else who was the president. I have to admit, I don't remember. But it was an organized effort. Yeah. I mean, I guess it's 40 years old, so we can say this now without mentioning names, but there were some pretty nasty phone calls made, because in any boycott situation, all one guy has to do is show up and make the single for the 10 grand or whatever they were. I'm sure it was more like 3 grand at the time, whatever they were paying. So there was some, what would be the politically correct way to say it, some very coercive phone calls made. Gee, I would hate to have something happen to you.
Mm-hmm.
So nobody showed. Not a single fuel car showed. The NHRA's response to it was kind of funny. They paid, this is the honest truth, at an NHRA national event, they paid $500 for the longest alcohol funny car burnout, because they were the only funny cars on the property.
Wow.
Yeah.
That does not sound like NHRA at all.
It does not. It does not.
That is wild for sure. So going bracket racing, they're asking, and I think you are obviously a great individual to ask, as heavily involved you were with Pro Modified back in the day. Do you think they need in NHRA trim to be brought back to 1,000 foot? Or maybe you were actually answering that with the other.
Do I think Pro Mod needs to be brought to 1,000?
Yes, that's what they're asking.
Well, when you brought up the Pro Stock boycott, the Pro Stock boycott was for a very specific reason. Do you remember what it was?
I do not.
They were only prepping the track to 1,000 feet. And the Pro Stock guys were saying, hey, over here, we run 1,320 feet, with a car that has a 6-inch wing or deck spoiler. We can't do that. And if you remember, they went to Concord, to Charlotte, and crashed 3 or 4 cars once they got off the glue at 1,000 feet. And that's when they said, no more. And NHRA started spraying the last 300 feet for them since then. Now, Pro Modified and NHRA is such a weird world. Most fans don't understand that it's still not an NHRA class. It's again, because NHRA can't add any new classes anymore. That's completely out of the question. That's why it was sponsored by other people for so long. And then when they ran out of people that were willing to put money up for it, NHRA had to put up something just to keep the thing alive. But as you're aware, they're not a part of either banquets, the sportsmen or the pros. They only recently started sharing the winner's stage. They only recently got a Wally. And most people are unaware that it costs an insane amount of money for them to enter, and they're paid almost nothing. Now, that's not really that much different than any other class. But I got to fall back on the heroin addict deal. Even when it was $35,000 up front to run for the season in NHRA Pro Mod. And again, NHRA had nothing to do with it. There was a variety of sponsors. Most people remember who they were that were actually running the program. In all seriousness, until recently, NHRA Pro Modified was a track rental program. A company would come in and rent 35 minutes for qualifying sessions and 40 minutes for the first round for this little special club thing that they had going on. That's all it was. I was involved with it from the beginning, from 2002 Gainesville, the first NHRA Pro Mod race. I went to every one of them until 2018. There's a long line of human beings that will pay triple whatever they're charging right now to be a part of that group. However, the line is getting shorter. Now, we just went through 2 years of total and complete uncertainty in all aspects of our lives. The car count was dropping before 2020. We all understand that. But you can't really point any fingers right now while COVID is still in existence as to why there's only 16 cars now instead of 20, instead of 25, instead of 32. There was a tremendously long period of time. It was about 8 or 9 years that NHRA Pro Modified was limited to 32. And there was a huge line of people that were playing. So there were a huge line of people that wanted to pay. That doesn't exist anymore. A lot of it has to do with the radio versus the world conundrum. The quicker you go, the more it costs, the less people that can play. So what do? Right now, there's so many combinations involved that are competitive, with the sole exception of nitrous cars, I guess. But with centrifugal blowers, screw blowers, roots blowers, and turbos all within a tenth, and the nitrous cars only barely outside of that, there's something else wrong. If people have that many options and they don't want to play any of them, there's something else going on there. And quite honestly, Pro Mod isn't doing really well anywhere. PDRA is having problems filling their fields. The Northeast Outlaw Pro Modified Association was the only group that was getting more than 16 at any event, and that includes NHRA. And they have, they almost fall into the funny car chaos category. They only have a couple of races a year, 8 or 10 races a year. They're relatively regional, and you don't have to commit. So I don't know. I don't know what the answer is to that.
So
I haven't answered many of your questions tonight. I apologize for that.
Oh no, it's great. It's great. I mean, like with Pro Mod, with all the different combinations, I don't envy any sanctioning body trying to figure it out.
Oh, me neither. No, I agree 100% with you.
And I think the PDRA was wise, honestly, and said, look, we're just going to split the nitrous boys from the boosted boys. I think that was a smart move, at least for them in the grand scheme of things. Does everybody need to do that? Well, no, but they did it and it's working out.
One other group that needs to be brought up that is drawing a solid 16, 18 cars to every event, and there's still a combination, is the NMCA. Their Pro Modified program is actually doing pretty good. It's not 40 cars in the pits trying to qualify or anything like that. But again, when you look at the really popular Pro Modified events, Snowbird Nationals, 50 cars, no commitment, 32 car field. Almost everybody has a chance to get in until, last year when it was a tenth of a second from 1 to number 32. But, it's a one-time deal. It's more of a social event than it is a race. So maybe we're losing that part of it. I don't know.
Maybe so. I mean, maybe we're seeing more transitioning from. It seemed to be that the thing was, we've got a championship series, and that gave some type of legitimacy. Maybe we're moving away from that, and we're seeing
the championship series isn't 7 points meets in 18 national events. It's doing well. Funny Car Chaos,
right,
and Northeast Outlaw Pro Mod, PDRA, all being great examples of that. NMCA, same thing.
Right.
6, 8 events, relatively regional, you're fine. I do want to bring up something that I really think Brian Loans came upon a fantastic statement last night during our conversation on the phone. We were talking about the Julie Natas situation, and he said he firmly believes that they should allow injected nitro funny cars because, as you brought up at the beginning of the show tonight, the injected nitro dragster program has gone from being just a part of Top Alcohol Dragster to the obvious training grounds for Top Fuel. And Brian says, or said in our conversation, he says, there is no training ground for blown fuel funny cars. You know, obviously it's not blown alcohol funny cars, or you'd see more people moving up from that. Blown alcohol for 50 years has basically been about as high as the true sportsman racer wants to go on the ladder. That's why they call it, you know, the ridiculous pseudonym of professional sportsman. You know, that's what it's actually called in NHRA. It's like, what the hell does that mean? You know, it's your living, but you're still going to lose money. Okay, that makes total sense. So from that perspective, he may be right. If there's supposed to be a AAA league to train future fuel pilots, there you go. We need injected nitro funny cars.
And I mean, the blown alcohol variety, whether it's torque converter or not, it's not similar.
You're absolutely correct on that. That's a fantastic point. Is people look at an alcohol funny car and they say, well, that seems like it'd be the logical stepping stone to fuel cars. It's completely different. You know, you're shifting a 3-speed transmission, you're leaving at 8,000 RPM. You know, the cars react completely differently. They pull different ways. You know, it's completely different. You're absolutely right.
Well, Sam had an issue. Someone apparently hit a power line or something. He can't get back on at all. He put that in the
Sam, that's what you get for
section.
doing a radio. That's what you get for doing a podcast while you're driving.
Right. There you go. I know that, you know, several weeks back, he was speaking about, you know, pro mod getting a little bit more chops and talking about professional modified. I want to ask you, where do we get this term? And I noticed in IHRA broadcasts back in the day, it was routinely pro modified, not even pro mod, but pro modified. So where did we get this name for this class of these strange door slammers?
I honestly have to ask you, do you know the answer, or you really don't?
I don't know the answer, but I know you do because you were involved in it.
I was the guy that created the name. Yeah, but yeah. I thought maybe you were just leading into it, but I wasn't quite sure because there's two answers. There's the easy answer, and then there's the truly explanatory answer. Yes, I came up with the name Pro Modified. Yes, the Pro Modified term actually existed at the time. Greer, South Carolina called their top bracket class, Greer Dragway in Greer, South Carolina, Mike Greer's track, called their Super Pro bracket class Pro Modified. But that's not where I got the idea. There was actually a contest. Ted Jones had a contest to name this new class, and a lot of people had crazy ideas like, you know, ultimate stump pullers and, you know, outlaw super door slammer mountain motor, whatever. And the problem with those names is they're colorful, but they only mean something to people who already know what they mean. You know, it's like the term funny car. You know, it doesn't mean anything to your grandmother, you know, unless clowns come out of it. You know, it's not a funny car. So here's what the deal was. At the time, which was 1990, you know, Pro Modified came out of Top Sportsman Eliminator, which IHRA created in 1976. Originally, it was called Pro Street. Then it was called Quick Rod. No, I'm sorry. It was originally called Pro Street. Then it was Street Rod. Then it was Quick Rod. Then it was Top Sportsman. And what they did was they ran a Quick 4. The 4 quickest door slammers after qualifying ran a special Quick 4 program that Mike Thermos of NOS Nitrous Oxide Systems paid for. And that eventually became a Quick 8. And at the end of 1989, Ted Jones, president of the IHRA, experimented with a Quick 16 at the last what they used to call World Title Series events, which is their version of a Lucas Oil Drag Racing Series points meet at Atco, New Jersey in the fall of 1989. That was the test run for a new class, a new 16-car qualified heads-up class that was, stand on its own. At the time, the IHRA had several hierarchies of classes. You probably know about the rod classes. There was hot rod, super rod, and quick rod. That was their names for 1090, 990, and 890 index classes. So those were the rod classes. Then we had stock, super stock, and pro stock. The gradual, ascension to the ultimate door slammers, which at the time were pro stock. We had alcohol funny car and blown fuel funny car. We had alcohol dragster and top fuel dragster. Then we also had modified eliminator, which most people out there know was a step between super stock and competition in NHRA eliminator. We had modified eliminator, and we had a class called factory modified eliminator. Factory modified was a heads up, no breakout program for small blocks and V6s in pro stock cars. Not many people remember that class. It only lasted about 3 years. And the reason it lasted 3 years is because, or only 3 years, is because within 3 years, it became just as expensive as pro stock. And people started getting rid of their $40,000 268-inch small blocks and just buying a $50,000 632 and going pro stock racing. So by including this new class as the name Pro Modified, it gave us the third of the 3-tier hierarchies: modified, factory modified, pro modified. And it differentiated it from pro stock. Pro stock still had body templates and stuff back then, so they did have stock appearing bodies. Pro modified was exactly what the name said. You could come out with a shovel-nosed 40 Willys or 40 Chevy, I guess is what Scotty Cannon's was. Right. You can come out with any stupid thing you wanted, modified to the hilt.
Yeah.
So that's where the name came from.
Doors on a funny car body.
and people got, just like they do with all other words, people got tired of saying 3 syllables. Instead of modified, they just said mod. And it became Pro Mod Eliminator. Actually, the official name in NHRA is still Pro Modified.
Yes.
Just thought I'd throw that in there.
Yeah. I've wondered this for a while. I look back to tapes of the 80s, and there was a time where Nitro and Pro Stock ranks, you would see a lot of names from NHRA show up at IHRA events and run them. And it almost seemed like there were a continuation of battles from one body to another body. And there'd be times you'd have an NHRA champion who duked it out with an IHRA champion who was right there in the running in the NHRA.
Mm-hmm. Very, very much so.
Right. I think Bernstein and Oswald, that's what one that comes to my mind.
For sure. Oswald was world champion in Nitro Funny Car in both NHRA and IHRA associations at the time when they were the only two.
Right.
Garlitz came close. He won AHRA and NHRA and was second in IHRA one year. He was the closest to doing the hat trick. But there's a very quick answer to why that you don't see that anymore. First of all, there's no place else to race than NHRA.
Now, yes. Yeah.
Second of all, is the commitment thing. Back then, IHRA had 8 races, NHRA had probably 12. So the top 5, 6, 8 teams could run all of both. It was actually kind of the pick and choose mode when AHRA was still in existence, an association that I announced for until they went out of business in 1984. The AHRA had 10 events as early as 1970, a year that the NHRA expanded to 7 events. And the IHRA didn't actually appear until 1971, and they only started with 4. So in the 1970s, if you were the richest man on earth and stupid enough to run a fuel car, you probably could hit every national event and not break 30 races. So there were more options, but it was still a very minimal commitment to run 2 associations in the 80s, the years that you're talking about.
All right. So with that being stated, where does these one-off, even including nitro events, come into the scheme? Like, I'm probably butchering the name of the magazine, but like what Popular Hot Rodding had a national event or some type or one-off event.
Absolutely correct. High Performance Cars had one. Popular Hot Rodding had one. Superstock and Drag Illustrated had one. That was a big thing that started in the mid-'60s, was these magazines having these wars of having their own independent big races. But there were one. You know, Superstock didn't have a series, neither did Popular Hot Rodding. I announced the Popular Hot Rodding event, which was in Martin, Michigan, its entire life. It went from 1968 or 69 was the first year to its final year in 1989. And the only reason they stopped having them was 2 reasons. The magazines started disappearing, and the sport wasn't as popular as it used to be for a variety of reasons. You know, you have to remember in the 1970s and 80s, there were only a couple of years that weren't financial disasters, you know, as far as the stock market and inflation and everything else. And the 1970s were brutalized in 73 and 74 and in 79 and 80 with the 2 oil embargoes. I mean, more tracks closed in 73 and 74 than in any other period in drag racing history because of the world coming to a halt. You know, it's really what it was. So back to your question, the magazine races were done for the magazine. As a matter of fact, they basically were held so that they could sell one issue of their magazine full of all kinds of cool drag racing stuff that they themselves controlled. Popular Hot Rodding was a much broader title. Popular Hot Rodding. It included hot rodding. It included street rods, vans, drag racing, you know, all kinds of stuff. Superstock and Drag Illustrated was a hardcore drag racing magazine. High Performance Cars was a very weird mix of, factory stuff, East Coast drag racing, features of drag cars, but almost exclusively bodied ones, you know, no altereds or dragsters or stuff like that. So every magazine had its own reasons for doing that stuff. I actually forget why you were asking that. Go ahead.
I just wonder how they fit in, and I guess it would go back to that you had the opportunity in the schedules. Did they have a decent payout for those days? Was it that case?
Yeah. No, they were huge. Yeah. And again, because it was only one race. I mean, Wes Buck did the same thing for the last couple of years.
Yeah.
And rightfully so, because he's one of the last drag racing magazines out there. So, you know, I guess there's still a market for it. I'll be honest with you. We go back to the very first thing you said on the show tonight, and that's Chris Graves has changed the world, because, you know, he's doing this. His entire idea came with just a little bit of help from Bubba Corzine, who was his event director at the time. But he created an entirely new concept, not new to the world, but new to the sport of drag racing, because drag racing promoters are a bunch of old bastards stuck in the mud and stuck in their ideas. And Chris just walked in and said, you don't need to buy advertising. We got this thing called Facebook. We got this thing called Instagram. We got this thing called, you know, TikTok. He just changed everything about the way these events are promoted. And look what's happening. And I'll be honest with you, with the amount of money that the Texas Motorplex is paying for this thing, don't kid yourself. It's making money. Or they would have never said, let's do it again. Never, ever.
Right.
You know, nobody's stupid in this business. Nobody loses $100,000 and then says, let's do that again. Maybe it'll be better next year. You know, they walk. So it's all Chris Gray's fault.
There you go. Well, Brett, look, through the technical difficulties and everything, thank you for coming on tonight. I got to get back out there and go get some footage and get some barbecue. But, man, I wish you were here. I know you'd love to be here and wish you were.
Honest to God, no exaggeration. If there was any race I could get to, it would be this one. It really would. Chris is a good friend. Tara's a good friend. You know, hopefully their new kid's a good friend. Speaking of good friends, I do have to say I am crushed. No pun intended. Please, no pun intended. I am crushed about what happened to DeCuson's new car. I don't even know if you brought it up at the beginning of the show, but his dad, Rick DeCuson, was an AHRA superstar. Many-time national event winner, many-time world champion in the superstock ranks. His mom, Jeannie, is a wonderful lady. His dad's no longer with us, unfortunately. And to see that happen to that guy, you know, with literally the creation of a dream, I just hope he comes back. You probably know more about how the car was than I do. Do you know anything specific?
From, as I explained earlier in the show, I just initially saw a photo of it just sideways, and I didn't know that
I think that was the first run. The second run's where it went into the guardrail.
Yeah, so it did. It wound up. I have already been told that they already intend to front half it and get a new body. There's already plans in the works. But
that's great news. I hadn't heard anything yet. So
yeah, but it hurt it.
Well, I'll be watching you on Flow Racing all weekend long, and probably switching back and forth to see what's happening with the 8 or 10 radial cars that ought to go pretty fast at Valdosta this weekend. But I appreciate you having me on. You and Sam are always fun to listen to, and I'll be watching you this weekend, so do good.
All right. Thank you, Brett. Appreciate it, man. Have a good night.
Thanks, everybody.